Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, where I talk about vampires, werewolves, and other supernatural creatures. This has to be one of the most requested shows I've had on the channel, so I hope you enjoy. I will be covering the vampires from the popular British TV show, Being Human. I will also briefly cover the other supernaturals that appear because it will tie in with the vampires. And of course there will be some spoilers for the show, but I do always try to keep them to a minimum in case my video makes you want to watch the series. Being Human premiered in 2008 and ran for 5 seasons, ending in 2013. The show follows the lives of 3 roommates, a vampire, a werewolf, and a ghost. The vampire named Mitchell is played by actor Aidan Turner. The werewolf George is played by Russell Tovey, and the ghost Annie is played by Lenora Critchlow. It's worth noting that the success of the UK version of Being Human led to the creation of an American adaptation, which ran for 4 seasons from 2011 to 2014. So the 2 shows were actually running at the same time for a while. But for many, the original British version will always hold a special place in their hearts. Before I get into the supernaturals from Being Human, I want to tell you guys about the Vampire World book series, which is today's sponsor. The Vampire World story follows a character named Alex as she survives in a post-apocalyptic world ravaged with vampires. The survivors live on an airship that constantly moves to stay in the safety of the sun, but they have to make dangerous trips down into the cities for supplies. It has a lot of great action, and I'm currently listening to the audiobook version and it has some really tense moments. If you're interested in the Vampire World series, you can get all 6 books on Audible and Amazon/Kindle. They're also part of Audible Premium and Kindle Unlimited, so if you have those services, then you can get the book for free. I will have the different links to the book in the description below. And thanks so much to the Vampire World series for sponsoring the video. I want to start by explaining werewolves and ghosts, because like I said, they have some tie-ins with vampires and it will save some explaining later. First, the lichens. Werewolves stem from a curse created by the devil. The werewolves in Being Human have a horrific transformation, with George letting out horrible screams as all of his bones break and then re-heal. The actual transformations of the werewolves and the practical effects they used looked really good. It's probably one of the best TV show werewolf transformations I've ever seen. One werewolf says that every transformation, the skin mends tougher and the bones heal stronger. Werewolves have some impressive abilities, including enhanced physical strength, speed, and agility while transformed. They are able to tear apart some of the strongest vampires. Werewolves also have heightened senses and can track a scent like a bloodhound. They even have these heightened senses in human form, and they become more acute close to the full moon. Werewolves seem to be especially loyal toward their friends and family. George was extremely protective of his friends and particularly his vampire roommate Mitchell. On the downside, George's werewolf nature also comes with some weaknesses. He struggles with the loss of control during the full moon, and his primal instincts can lead him to make dangerous and destructive choices. Once they turn, they're almost completely uncontrollable. But lichens with sufficient willpower have been seen resisting killing people that they know. It's revealed that George was turned into a werewolf when he was scratched by another werewolf during a night out. He was only scratched, not bitten, and the next full moon he turned for the first time. Most werewolves are turned by being scratched by a transforming or fully transformed werewolf. George once scratched someone while halfway through his transformation, but still managed to infect them. Although they're usually infected by a scratch, a bite would probably work as well, just much less likely for the victim to survive. They also do have slightly improved healing while in human form, as Nina was able to quickly recover from a pretty bad stab wound, and George remarks that it's one of the good things about being a werewolf. Werewolves in Being Human cannot transform unless it's a full moon, but there is one exception. Well, kinda. When a werewolf was trapped, he was able to look at a picture of a full moon and trick his body into a half transformation. This increased his physical strength, allowing him to kill multiple vampires with ease. The downside to this was the transformation usually causes temporary organ failure. The fully turned werewolf can heal from that no problem, but since he couldn't complete the transformation due to tricking his body, he died from the organ failure. So werewolves can do a half transformation, but it basically means they're gonna die. As for weaknesses, they can't cross running water while transformed, but they're not shown being weak to silver or anything else. Like I said, their healing factor is amazing, but they can be killed if they are damaged sufficiently. Vampires and werewolves have had a long and negative relationship due to how vampires have treated werewolves over the years. usually talking down on them, calling them dogs, and even making them fight in cages for entertainment. I will talk a little more about the relationship between vampires and werewolves a little later. Now for the ghosts. They are souls of humans who have unfinished business. Werewolves have also been seen becoming ghosts, but for some reason they never stay on Earth. Once a ghost does what they need to move on, a doorway will appear. This door leads to purgatory. Once there, they will be assessed and then sent somewhere else. If for some reason a ghost refuses to move on and walk through the door, the men with sticks and rope will try to make them go by force. The men with sticks and rope are some demons that make sure the ghosts cross over when they are supposed to. They're like the gatekeepers to purgatory. They have the power to send someone to hell or wherever else they are supposed to go. They can communicate through electrical devices and can physically drag ghosts through the doors. But if a ghost is strong enough, they can resist them. The men with sticks and rope are not allowed to cross over to the mortal plane unless allowed by the devil in very rare cases. Both vampires and ghosts are extremely afraid of the men with sticks and rope, and I'll explain why vampires are afraid of them in a little bit.
The people behind the doors, they whisper. I don't know what we're waiting for to happen.
Purgatory itself seems to be like a kind of DMV waiting room kind of place. A ghost describes it as a place with endless rooms and forms to fill out. The men with sticks and rope seem to become extremely angry when someone ends up in purgatory that's not supposed to be there, and almost sent a ghost to hell for breaking the rules. Ghosts can have a wide range of magic-like abilities, being able to affect the physical world even though no one can see them. Well, except for vampires and werewolves. Other supernaturals such as vampires, werewolves, and I guess other demons are also capable of seeing ghosts. There's also some rare humans that can see and communicate with ghosts. Aside from ghosts, werewolves, and vampires, there's also demons like the succubi. They're able to drain life from people and look just like humans. They are the result of a demon mating with a human, so succubi are half demons. They can infect a human with their magic by just touching them. This will cause the person to fall in love and become infatuated. Then they will sleep with the person, and this will kill them. Vampires are actually immune to the succubi's effects because they are already dead. Now we can talk about the vampires. I'm going to start with their origins. The vampire race started in approximately 1000 BC. In Asia, there was two brothers who made a pact with the devil. Their deal was immortality, but in exchange they would need to consume blood. Some have wondered if Mr. Snow may have been one of these original vampires given his age. Another vampire even regarded Mr. Snow as one of the earliest vampires. But this wouldn't really make sense as it said the original brothers were Asian, and Mr. Snow isn't. Over time, vampires have evolved. A long time ago, they could not walk in the sun. However, today they can. Some modern-day vampires are still greatly irritated when exposed to sunlight for too long, but it won't burn them. Vampires have their own myths and legends that came from the 5 dreams. When the two brothers were turned into vampires, they experienced 5 dreams the first time they fed on blood. These dreams were about the future of vampires and a prophecy. It seems that humans were pretty aware of vampires' existence until around the 1600s. Anyone accused of being a vampire would be put in a prison far from humans. In 1665, there was a mass purge of vampires in Bristol, and since then, vampires have covered up their history, disguising it as a myth or legend. It seems to have worked too, because modern-day humans have no idea that vampires or other supernaturals are real. Similar to the Blade series, many vampires have managed to get into positions of power and authority, such as the chief of police. The leaders of all vampires are called the Old Ones. They were able to easily cover up any killings in the city done by vampires, as the guy who worked in the morgue would rule that they died of an accident or taking their own life. It's implied that vampires have infiltrated organizations much higher up than the police though. A vampire is accused of being a mass murderer, like top 10 most wanted, and they easily make it all go away and frame someone else for the crime.
I don't believe in the devil.
I'm not sure I did until I met him.
How does someone become a vampire in being human? While we never actually see the whole process completed on camera, mostly just talked about, Mitchell does say that the person must be turned just before they die. During this time, the person drinks the blood from a vampire, and this will begin the transformation. After drinking the blood, they will still die, and remain that way for up to a few hours. Their soul will be between life and death. They will experience visions. And do you know what they see? The men with sticks and rope. Yeah, the demons that protect purgatory dressed in Victorian surgical gear. This is often very frightening and traumatizing for newly turned vampires. Eventually, they will wake up, and it's common for someone who has just turned to feel sick and disoriented for a short time while they adjust to their body's drop in blood pressure, heart rate decreasing, and the new craving for blood. Vampires seem to crave blood almost immediately after being turned. We learn that in order to get the rush from drinking human blood, it must be fresh. Vampires don't feed on blood itself, but the life force within it. After just a few hours, blood will taste bad to a vampire and will not get rid of their cravings. We see a vampire steal blood bags from a hospital and drink them, but nothing happens. Mitchell tells her it has to be fresh. In the Being Human novels, there are very few humans who are immune to vampirism. These immune humans' blood is poisonous to vampires, causing any vampire who drinks it to die. This does not appear in the show though. Vampires feed on blood usually by biting someone's neck and drinking. However, vampires in this series don't actually need blood to live. They can eat regular food to sustain themselves just fine. Some vampires have went as long as 57 years without drinking. But not one single known vampire has ever been able to abstain from blood permanently. Something always pulls them back in. So if they don't need blood to live, why do they feed? Vampires will crave blood like a drug addiction, almost like it's part of their nature. When regularly consuming human blood, vampires will act differently, more aggressive and impulsive. It almost changes their whole personality. A vampire that isn't consuming blood won't be that much stronger than a human, but when consuming blood on a regular basis, they can be quite strong. Plus, they can also take more damage and heal quicker. So basically, for a vampire to see true benefits, they must be consuming blood. When they're in the altered mind state when on a blood diet, vampires can kill without having it affect their conscience. They even get a rush and enjoyment from killing. They will also not feel most emotions like guilt, loneliness, or sadness. If they stop drinking the blood though, all those feelings of guilt will come rushing back. They will be faced with all the horrible things they did at once. This is often overwhelming to vampires, and that's why they continue to drink rather than go clean. The craving makes them drink, and the guilt makes them continue. If a vampire does try to go clean, they can experience what is basically withdrawals. They will have extreme cravings, pain, and can even suffer hallucinations. But this is all only temporary. If they stay off blood for long enough, all these side effects will go away, and they will have much greater control over themselves. Vampires who are drinking blood also seem to be more hostile toward werewolves. The character Mitchell is very loving toward his friend George, but when he's drinking blood, he's rude and distant with him. At times, Mitchell snaps like he has multiple personality disorder and tells George to run and get somewhere safe before going back to his more evil self. Another older vampire was also shown being quite friendly to werewolves, but after drinking blood referred to them as beasts and treated them as such. He even spoke like a different person, saying things like, "Your friend is gone." It's almost as if vampires' dislike of werewolves is ingrained in their curse. There's something called the taint. This is the sweetest blood. It's highly addictive to vampires, and when they smell a human with this blood, all they can think about is feeding, and they become uncontrollable. Humans only have the taint when they have been bitten by a rare spider that causes blood poisoning. The vampires in this show look identical to humans most of the time. When they feed or become enraged, their eyes will turn black and their fangs will come out. They also make a sort of hissing noise when they're angry. When a vampire is turned, they remain that age and physical condition forever. It is implied that once vampires reach 1,000 years or older, their bodies start to decay from the inside out. The oldest vampire known in the series is Mr. Snow. He is 3,000 years old. He looks much more pale than the other vampires, and he also has black veins. His teeth and nails also seem to be dying as they have a blackish color. Another 1,000-year-old vampire also displayed extremely pale skin with some black veins on his face. I wonder if these vampires can truly live forever, or if their bodies would eventually rot. Vampires cannot be captured by photograph, video, or a mirror. They can still be seen in semi-reflective surfaces though. A vampire explains the reason they have no reflection. He says it's because the devil takes their reflection to remind them that their soul belongs to him. Vampires jokingly call their lack of reflection Old Nick's wink. because Old Nick is another name for the devil. One of the vampire's most important rules is do not get caught by the police, because when they try to take a mugshot, well, there won't be one. That's why their number one priority are covering up all the murders and having the police in their pocket. They don't necessarily care what every vampire is doing or about protecting them. It's about protecting the whole species. Vampires look very similar to humans, and their bodies work pretty much the same, but there are a few differences. Unlike most, these vampires actually do have a heartbeat, 1 beat per minute, but they are still biologically dead, or undead. A vampire was able to speed up his heart rate to fool a medical machine that he was hooked up to, so older vampires can probably learn to control their heart rate. Vampires are also cold to the touch. When George killed a vampire, he remarked that his blood was cold. Since vampires are technically dead, this allows them to do some unique things. Ghosts have the ability to teleport, and they can take a vampire with them because they are also dead. Vampires can also enter the doors that appear for ghosts when they move on. When a vampire entered one of these doors, he was transported to his own purgatory. He was eventually able to leave though. I doubt a normal human or werewolf will be able to enter a door like a vampire, because they're not dead. Werewolves can see the doors though, so it is possible they could also enter, but I think something would stop them from going in. Vampires are interesting because usually the soul passes on to purgatory after dying, but with vampires their soul is property of the devil. Apparently they do still pass on though after dying, but not in the same way that others do, since they have already died. When a vampire does eventually die, it's possible they just appear in purgatory. It's also possible they go to hell, since their soul is owned by the devil. Although these vampires were cursed by the devil himself, they do not possess any magic-like abilities. They cannot compel people, fly, have telekinesis, or do anything else like that. Almost all their abilities are physical. First, they have superhuman strength. Vampires are much stronger than humans, and like most vampires, they grow stronger with age. A vampire over 100 years old was able to easily pick a human off the ground with one arm. The 3,000-year-old Mr. Snow was able to rip a human apart with one arm. 2 vampires were able to kill 20 trapped humans in a matter of a few minutes with no issues. Vampires are also much stronger than werewolves while they're in human form, but only a vampire of considerable age would be stronger than a transformed werewolf. These vampires do not have any kind of super speed. They move at the same speed or maybe slightly faster than a human. Like I said earlier, vampires that don't drink blood are not as strong and cannot heal as fast as those who do drink blood. Vampires are immune to most kinds of physical trauma. Even gunshots barely harm them. A vampire was hit by a car that killed a human, and the vampire was completely unharmed, which confused some of the people who witnessed it. They're very tough, but they can be killed by overwhelming physical trauma like a large explosion, decapitation, or most importantly, a stake to the heart. Although vampires have died from other means, it seems like a stake or complete destruction of the body is the only way to guarantee death. One vampire was brutally killed by a werewolf, but not staked. Later, some other vampires found where he was buried and soaked the grave in blood. This brought him back to life. He did suffer memory loss, but it eventually came back. This is pretty similar to vampires from Underworld and Blade. As long as the body isn't destroyed, blood can pretty much bring them back from anything. All supernaturals seem to have some level of clairvoyance, or an extra sense, an ability to tell if someone else is also supernatural. Vampires seem to be more adept at this than werewolves and ghosts though. Often ghosts or werewolves will not be able to instantly tell if someone is a ghost, vampire, or werewolf.
You're a ghost.
Of course I'm a ghost. What did you think I was?
Vampires, on the other hand, seem to almost always be able to instantly identify if someone is supernatural and what they are. This could mean they have some kind of greater ability to perceive the supernatural, or it's because most vampires are much older than ghosts and werewolves, so they've just learned how to tell the differences.
People like us can recognize people like you. It's complicated.
These vampires have super senses, greatly improved sight, smell, and hearing, especially when they're thirsty for blood. Werewolves give off a special scent that vampires can pick up on very easily, so it's unlikely a werewolf would sneak up on a vampire. Their sense of smell seems to be especially acute, as they can smell blood from a distance and can tell if another vampire is on a blood diet just by how they smell. The ancient vampire Mr. Snow has a unique ability not possessed by anyone else. He can control other vampires. Even if they want to disobey, They can't help themselves from doing anything that he says. This is because of his ancient status. He was created so long ago that almost all vampires that exist today have some of his DNA within them. This allows him to have control over other vampires. Of course, every vampire has their weaknesses. In being human, vampires can walk in the sun. Like I mentioned earlier though, prolonged periods in the sun can still irritate them. Most vampires are seen wearing heavy clothes to keep themselves mostly covered, even though it's not absolutely necessary. Garlic doesn't seem to physically harm vampires, but Mitchell is shown recoiling from it, so it must give them some level of discomfort, possibly due to their enhanced smell. Vampires must be invited into a private home. If they enter the home without invitation, it will severely burn them, causing them great pain. It doesn't seem to be fatal though, as a vampire was able to remain in a house for minutes while being burned and eventually seemed to be in less pain.
How did you get in here? We didn't invite you in.
Well, you don't get to be 1,000 years old without learning a trick or two.
Vampires over 1,000 years old, or old ones, were able to enter a home without invitation. When asked how he could do this, his reply was, "You don't get to be 1,000 years old without learning a few tricks." So we don't know exactly how he did this. Vampires can also not enter churches or walk on any blessed or consecrated grounds. These vampires are not weak to silver. However, they are weakened by religious symbols of any kind and writings like the Bible. When a cross or other religious symbol are used against a vampire, they cannot look upon it, and it's like a kind of force field pushing them back. A man trapped a vampire by locking it in a room with a cross painted on the door so it couldn't leave. So the symbol doesn't even have to be physical. Even a painted cross will repel a vampire. A vampire once used a dead human body as a shield to approach a cross and escape. So there is ways around this weakness. A cross actually won't work on a vampire if the person using it loves them or is friends with them. George wears a religious symbol on his neck, and this should cause Mitchell pain. But because George cares about Mitchell, he's not affected by the symbol. When a vampire lost his memory, he was also not affected by the cross. This means that the power of the cross might come from belief or fear. When the vampire regained his memory, he was harmed by the cross again. How or why the cross actually works is a bit mysterious. The cross is also less effective the more vampires there are. One vampire can be held back with a cross quite easily, but a group of them would probably be able to get much closer to it, maybe even kill the person holding it. Old ones are also not affected by crosses. An old one does tell a story about him being trapped by a crucifix at one time though, so old ones weren't always immune to crosses. I guess that happens once they reach a certain age. If you want to kill a vampire, the best weapon is a wooden stake. Regular knives, bullets, and most weapons have little to no effect on vampires. But wood, for some reason, harms vampires more than other materials. Even if you don't stab them in the heart, a wooden stake or wooden anything will hurt the vampire much more and can temporarily incapacitate them. There is something that's highly poisonous to vampires: werewolf blood. It will burn a vampire's skin on contact like acid, and if ingested, will kill them within a matter of seconds. When a vampire dies from werewolf blood, they turn to ash, similar to if they got staked. So it's the only other way to guarantee a vampire stays dead.
Old Nick, Old Scratch, Voland, the Stranger.
I want to briefly talk about the relationship between vampires and werewolves. They have disliked each other for thousands of years. Groups of vampires have been seen attacking werewolves for fun and putting them in cages to fight. This actually benefits the creator of the supernatural, the devil. He has gone by many names: Old Nick, Satan, Old Scratch, Azazel, Woland, and the Stranger. He has no form of his own, so he must possess a human vessel. We learn that he created the vampire curse when he made a deal with two brothers. He also created the werewolves and possibly ghosts as well. The devil actually feeds off the energy created from the conflict between werewolves and vampires. He incited a full-on war between them in 1911 to feed off the energy it created, but in 1918 he was stopped. Since the devil gains power from the conflict between vampires and werewolves, this means he has a vested interest in keeping them fighting, so he does everything in his power to do so. The devil is extremely strong. He can manipulate reality, making it impossible for ghosts to move on. He also has control over purgatory and the men with sticks and rope. He has telekinesis and can make someone bleed from their eyes, nose, and mouth until they die. He could also make vampires suffer crippling pain. The devil can banish ghosts and take away their teleportation abilities. This is what makes some people think that he created ghosts, since he has so much power over them like he does with vampires. The devil can also open his own doors to the other side. The devil had the ability to take people back in time and offer them a chance to never become a vampire, or whatever they became. He can even be in multiple places at once. He says himself that he's not omnipresent, but he can multitask. During the show, we see that he can be in at least 3 different places at once, each version of him operating independently, but they are all the devil. These 3 versions of him are even in different points of time. He's a very interesting character, and I really enjoyed the actor that played him. His power seems to be almost limitless, but there is a way to kill him. He must be magically bound to his host's body. Then the host body can be killed, and he will be defeated. This is very difficult though, because a trinity must be formed between a ghost, a vampire, and a werewolf. The ghost must then drink the blood of the vampire and the werewolf. This will make the devil powerless. He can then be easily killed because he will be mortal, trapped in the body of a human. A very old vampire says to destroy the devil that all his curses must be used against him. This kind of implies that ghosts are in fact created by the devil. Once the devil is defeated by the Trinity, he will no longer exist in any form, banished to the dark abyss of nothing. Since the power of the supernatural curses comes from him, once he is defeated, all curses will be lifted. This is a bit of a shame for ghosts, I guess, because getting to come back to resolve your unfinished business wasn't really so much of a curse.
He drags the worlds to the brink of the abyss. Well done.
Vampires and werewolves have another connection. When the brothers that made a deal with the devil drank blood for the first time, they had 5 dreams. The 5th dream was a prophecy. It said that a werewolf would be born in the house of a trinity. We already know that this is when a ghost, a werewolf, and a vampire come together. The werewolf child would be the end for humans. Vampires would begin their plan to take over the world. On the other hand, if the child dies, it's the end of the vampire species. The prophecy was written on the skin parchments. These are 3 pieces of human skin that when put together show the complete prophecy. The separate pieces were lost for many years. We don't know much about the first vampires, but the fact that they were willing to make a deal with the devil, then wrote a prophecy on parchment made of human skin, makes me think they were quite brutal and barbaric. It's also pretty interesting that the 3 supernatural species are so interconnected. I wonder if the devil made the brothers have these visions, and if the prophecy was another play to feed off the energy created by a war. I have to say, one of my favorite times in this show is when Annie is first being tormented by the men with sticks and rope. They had such a creepy, unsettling presence. The effects they used to make their voice come through the electronics and how they could manipulate the TV to speak to people was really well done. I also really liked how the men with sticks and rope had a connection to vampires, since they're like the guardians of the afterlife.
Annie.
That's my video on the vampires and the other supernatural creatures from Being Human. Again, this was one of the most requested shows I've had on the channel, so I really hope you guys enjoyed, and I'm sorry it took so long. Let me know what you guys think of Being Human. I thought it was a great show, even though it gets a little weird after season 3. Also, let me know if there's any other movies, TV shows, or video games you want me to cover. If you enjoyed, leave a like, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't. It helps out a lot, and I really appreciate it. An extra thanks to my awesome members, Roderick, Steven556, Owen Wildish, and Joseph Roman. Thanks so much for supporting the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video.